It's recap time. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode blank of the Shower Podcast, the podcast where I'm in my shower and you do you. I'm your host, Chip, and these, together with the following episodes, I still haven't decided on the exact number, will be a bit of an experiment. So let me explain a bit what I want to do here. I've been playing around with this tool that I found online called Notebook LM by Google that lets you feed it with videos, texts, information from the internet, and it kind of gives you the chance to chat and extract information from these videos. Out of curiosity, since now we produced more than 80 videos, I was like, okay, let me try to feed my videos to this tool and see what comes out of it. Specifically, there is a very, very, very intriguing option of creating a sort of podcast out of the information that you send that analyzes, describes, and summarizes the info that it's present in those videos. And now, something that, it's normal because, everybody has their days and you might have to do your stuff. You might have lost or just were not necessarily interested in a specific episode. And what I want to do here, since that unfortunately I will also be out for a few days and I feel like I need a bit of a moment of inspiration, because again, if you have followed the last episodes, you'll understand why, but I need a bit of a fresh start. So I was like, why not use this opportunity to create this tool, give you the chance for a recap, and continue with my progress towards the 365 episodes. I think it's a fair, let's say, trade-off between me bringing actual content that inspires me and you being able to actually think back on the episodes that we did and make sure to maybe go and listen again to the original one, trying to get the insight you were looking for. I won't go any further with this intro. I just wanted to throw it out there. Hope you like it. We'll start from the start up to episode 82. So maybe up to episode 80. I will keep I'll see how to divide it. But here we are. Enjoy it. Hope you will like it. And see you at the next one.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So today we're doing something a little different, a bit of a special request. Chip, the host of the Shower Podcast, right? Well, he's asked us to take a look back at some of his recent episodes.
Yes, specifically episodes 36 through 40. He wants us to kind of pull out the big themes, see if there are any threads running through them, the kind of connections you might miss if you're just listening to them one by one.
Exactly. And it's 5 consecutive episodes, right? So we get a nice little snapshot of what's been on his mind lately.
Yeah.
So for those of you who haven't had a chance to catch up on the Shower Podcast recently, think of this as your cheat sheet, your shortcut to getting the gist of it all. And maybe even some extra insights that Chip himself didn't explicitly lay out.
Absolutely. And remember, learner, this isn't just a summary. We're going to dig a little deeper, analyze, maybe even debate a few points. We want you to walk away from this with something to think about, something that might spark some new ideas or help you see things from a different perspective.
Sounds good. So let's kick things off with episode 36, titled, I Hate It. This one was kind of interesting because Chip was talking about how our surroundings, like the environment we're in, can have a surprisingly big impact on us, and often without us even realizing it.
Yeah, he talked about moving to Switzerland and being really taken aback by hearing people arguing. He said it was so different from his experience in Rome, where apparently arguments were just like part of the background noise.
Right. And I got him thinking about how we kind of absorb the behaviors we're exposed to regularly, even if we don't consciously realize it's happening. He even brought up the opposite side of that, how being surrounded by supportive, enthusiastic people can make it way easier to stick to good habits. It's almost like our environment sets the tone for our own behavior, right?
Absolutely. And I think Chip's reaction to the arguments in Switzerland really highlights how much our past experiences shape our expectations of what's normal. It's like he'd gotten so used to a certain level of, I don't know, maybe confrontational energy in Rome that the absence of it in Switzerland was actually jarring.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of what we consider normal is just what we've become accustomed to, and how much of that is actually serving us well.
Right. And are there subtle things in our environment that we've adapted to, maybe even embraced as normal, that are actually holding us back or bringing us down?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's not just about the people around us, right? He even used the example of road traffic, something that was a constant source of stress for him. And his solution wasn't to try and change the traffic, but to change his route.
Exactly. Sometimes the most effective strategy is simply to navigate around the negative influence, right? Rather than trying to change something that's probably outside of your control.
Makes sense. All right, let's move on to episode 37, which was titled, It Hurts So Bad. This one was recorded right after Chip had injured his ankle and hand during a paddle training session.
Yeah, and what struck me about this episode was how, even though he was obviously in pain, he was kind of fascinated by the way our bodies and minds can kick into gear when we need them to. He talked about how we take our normal abilities for granted until they're suddenly taken away.
Right. He's like, suddenly, even simple things like getting dressed or opening a door become these huge challenges. It really made him appreciate the things we usually do without even thinking about it.
It's like that saying, you don't know what you've got till it's gone, right? It's easy to take our physical abilities for granted until we experience a limitation.
Absolutely. And he also connected this to the idea of overexertion,
Yeah.
suggesting we should aim for a more sustainable pace in our daily lives.
Yeah.
Not always pushing ourselves to the limit
Yeah.
so that we have reserves for when those unexpected difficulties pop up.
Yeah, it's like a building in a buffer zone, right?
Yeah.
Having a little extra capacity so we can handle the curveballs life throws at us.
Exactly. And I think that's something we can all relate to, especially in today's world where everyone's always on the go and pushing themselves to do more. It's easy to forget that sometimes slowing down can actually be the smarter, more sustainable approach in the long run.
Absolutely. And it's interesting if you think about it, how this idea of operating at a sustainable level connects back to the idea of minimizing negative influences from episode 36. Constantly being exposed to stress, whether it's from our environment or our own self-imposed pressure, can definitely deplete our reserves, making us less resilient when we do face those unexpected challenges.
So taking care of ourselves, both physically and mentally, can actually be a way of proactively protecting ourselves from the negative stuff, right?
I think so. It's all interconnected, isn't it?
All right. Moving on to episode 38, titled Frustration. And as you might guess from the title, this one picks up right where episode 37 left off, with Chip still dealing with his injury and all the limitations that came with it.
Yeah, and in this one, he really delves into that feeling of frustration. He talks about how difficult it was to do even simple things and how frustrating it was to see everyone else moving around with ease while he was struggling.
It's almost like he felt out of sync with the world around him, right? Like everyone else was operating on a different frequency. And it made me think about how often we take our physical abilities for granted and how much our sense of self-reliance is tied to being able to move freely and do the things we want to do.
Absolutely. It's easy to forget how much we rely on our bodies to function in the world until that ability is compromised. And I think Chip's reflection on what it might be like to live with such limitations permanently really brings home the importance of empathy. Taking the time to consider the challenges that others might be facing and not judging their abilities or their pace.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to check our assumptions, right?
Right.
And to appreciate the things we often take for granted.
Definitely. And I think the other thing that stood out to me in this episode was Chip's story about his snowboarding injury, which, as I recall, resulted in a much longer recovery period.
Right. He brought it up to highlight the element of chance in these situations. Like sometimes you get lucky and bounce back quickly, and other times you're in for the long haul. And you really have no control over which way it goes.
Exactly. It's a reminder that as much as we like to plan and control things, there's always an element of unpredictability in life. And being able to adapt and roll with the punches to build that resilience we talked about earlier is so crucial.
It's true. All right, ready for a bit of a shift in gears? Episode 39 is titled Competition.
Yeah, this one was interesting. After 3 episodes focused on limitations and frustration, he kind of flips the script and starts talking about the positive side of competition.
Right. And it was inspired by his return to competitive paddle and tennis. He basically argued that putting ourselves to the test through competition is actually essential for growth. It's where we get to apply what we've learned, see how we stack up against others, and push ourselves beyond our comfort zone.
Yeah, he talked about how competition, whether it's against yourself or others, can be a great motivator, how it teaches you to handle stress and deal with failure, and how it forces you to learn from your mistakes and improve.
He even admitted to regretting not engaging in more competition when he was younger and encouraged listeners to embrace healthy competition in their own lives.
And I think that's a really important message, especially in a culture that often emphasizes collaboration and avoiding conflict. Competition, when approached in a healthy way, can be a powerful tool for personal growth.
It's true. It pushes us to be our best, to step outside our comfort zone, and to develop those skills and that resilience that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you think about it, how this episode connects back to the first one about environmental influences. In episode 36, the focus was on minimizing negative external influences, right? But in episode 39, Chip is suggesting that actively seeking out challenging environments through competition can actually be a positive thing.
That's a great point. It's like in the first scenario, the influence is passive and potentially negative, whereas in the second, the engagement is active, purposeful, and focused on self-improvement through challenge. It's all about choosing your battles, right? Recognizing which influences are holding you back and which ones can actually propel you forward.
Makes sense. All right, ready for the final episode in this deep dive?
Let's do it.
This one is episode 40, titled Reward Yourself. And it starts with Chip talking about the satisfaction of finally deep cleaning his house, which apparently included a long-standing aversion to mopping.
Yeah, and from there, he kind of segues into a broader discussion about the internal conflict between our responsible and less responsible selves, referencing the concepts of fast and slow thinking from the book, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Right, and to clarify for those who haven't read the book, fast thinking is our more impulsive, emotional side, while slow thinking is the more deliberate, rational part of our brain.
Exactly. And Chip's point was that we should consciously reward ourselves for making progress and sticking to our plans, even if those plans involve things we don't particularly enjoy, like mopping.
He even used the analogy of training a dog, saying that positive reinforcement makes it more likely that we'll repeat the desired behaviors. And he tied this into his decision to release these episodes at a slightly different time, framing it as a kind of reward for himself.
And I think this episode provides a really crucial strategy for navigating all the other themes we've been discussing. Acknowledging this internal tug of war between our impulsive and rational selves, and then using conscious self-reward as a tool to motivate and reinforce the behaviors we want to cultivate.
Right, it's like acknowledging that it takes effort to step outside our comfort zone, whether it's managing our environment, pushing through physical challenges, or engaging in competition. And the reward acts as a kind of positive feedback loop, making it more likely that we'll continue to make those efforts.
And Chip's analogy of training a dog is a great way to illustrate this. Consistency and positive reinforcement are key to shaping behavior, both in ourselves and in others.
Definitely. So as we've journeyed through these 5 episodes of the Shower podcast, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? We've talked about how our surroundings can influence us, how our bodies respond to setbacks, the impact of frustration, the power of competition, and the importance of rewarding ourselves for our efforts.
It's been a really fascinating exploration of how these different aspects of our lives intersect and influence each other.
So, as a final thought for you, learner, consider Chip's initial reflection from episode 36. Be mindful of your surroundings and the people that surround you, because without you knowing it someday, you might turn into them. Now think about that in the context of his later enthusiasm for competition and his advocacy for self-reward. Could actively seeking out challenging environments through competition be a deliberate way to shape who you become, rather than passively absorbing external influences? And how can rewarding yourself for those efforts reinforce the positive adaptations you make in response to those challenges?
Something to think about, isn't it?
It is. And we hope this deep dive into Chip's recent podcast episodes has given you some food for thought, maybe even a new perspective on your own experiences. If you're interested in exploring these ideas further, we encourage you to check out the Shower podcast and listen to the full episodes. And as always, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.